Congress can pass a single sentence hidden inside a budget bill, and that one sentence can stop the Department of Justice from doing something the DOJ publicly swears it has every right to do. And right now, in 2026, more than half a dozen of those sentences are alive at the same time. Quick question before we keep going. Are you subscribed? Because what I'm about to walk you through could literally change how you understand every gun enforcement headline you read for the rest of the year. If you are not subscribed yet, hit that button now. It takes 1 second, and it is the difference between knowing this stuff and missing it. Let me show you exactly what I mean, and I promise by the end you will see a story most gun news outlets have never told you straight. For most of your life, you have probably heard the same phrase over and over. The ATF is a powerful agency. The DOJ regulates firearms. Federal agencies can do what they want. Those phrases feel true, and they are partly true, but they leave out a giant piece of the puzzle. That giant piece is the United States Congress, and specifically the power Congress quietly wields every single year through something called appropriations riders. Here is the first thing you need to understand. Appropriations riders are not normal bills. They are not debated on the Senate floor with cameras rolling. They are not reviewed by major newspapers. They are almost always tucked inside the massive spending bills that Congress has to pass to keep the government funded at all. So here's how it works. Every year, federal agencies like the ATF, the FBI, and the Department of Justice need Congress to actually give them money. If Congress does not give them money, the agencies cannot operate. That gives Congress enormous leverage, and clever members of Congress, on both sides of the aisle, use that leverage to slip in language that tells those agencies what they cannot do. Now let me give you an example. Here is a hypothetical example to explain this. Imagine the DOJ announces a new policy too aggressively. Enforce a rule against pistol braces. The ATF says it will conduct thousands of inspections and start sending warning letters to gun owners. Then a budget bill passes, and buried in that bill is one sentence that says no federal funds may be used to enforce that specific rule. Suddenly, the ATF legally cannot spend $1 doing what it just promised the public it would do. That is not a made-up scenario. That kind of fight has actually happened. It is happening right now. And once you see how it works, you cannot unsee it. Now, this is where it gets interesting. A rider most gun owners have heard of, but few actually understand, is called the Tiahrt Amendment. Let me break this down for you. The Tiahrt Amendment was first attached to the FY2026 for Commerce, Justice, State Appropriations bill back in 2003. It was named after then Representative Todd Tiahrt of Kansas. The amendment was originally focused on one specific thing. It restricted the ATF from releasing certain firearms trace data to the public. That part is famous. First, here is what the rider does. It requires the FBI to destroy all approved gun purchaser records within 24 hours of the background check being approved. 24 hours? After that, those records are gone. That is huge because it means there is no permanent federal database of who passed a background check for what firearm. Second, the rider limits how ATF tracing data can be shared. Local police can use it. Federal agents can use it, but the data cannot be released in bulk to journalists, researchers, or advocacy groups for big-picture studies. Third, and this is the part most people miss, the Tiahrt Amendment is actually a package. Over the years, more riders have been added on top of it, expanding what ATF is forbidden to do with its money. Now let me explain why this matters. Without those riders, ATF would technically be allowed to keep detailed records of every gun purchase in America in a single searchable database forever. That has been the explicit fear of gun owners for decades. The Tiahrt riders are the wall, repeated every single year, that stops that from happening. Most people think the federal government already has a national gun registry. The truth is, Congress has spent more than 20 straight years passing riders that specifically forbid building one. But wait, the story does not stop there. And this is the part that really surprised me when I dug into it. Let me move you to the second big rider, the Dickey Amendment. Here's the part nobody's talking about. The Dickey Amendment was passed in 1996. On its face, it sounds tiny. It was buried in the same kind of appropriations bill. The text said that no CDC funds could be used to advocate or promote gun control. Read that again slowly, because the word advocate did something massive. First thing, the language did not literally ban research. It banned advocacy. But here is the crazy part. Within months, the CDC interpreted it so strictly that they stopped basically all gun violence research. The CDC's own budget was cut by exactly the amount it had spent on firearms research the previous year. Researchers found their funding pulled. Internal guidance went out telling scientists to stay away from the topic. Now you might be thinking, so what? So the CDC stopped some research. Why does that affect me as a gun owner? Here is why it matters. For almost 20 years after 1996, The federal government, the largest funder of medical research in the world, refused to study one of the leading causes of death in America. Doctors could not get federal grants to study gun violence epidemiology. Universities could not get CDC money to look at storage practices, suicide prevention, accidental shootings in the home. The Dickey rider did not just chill research, it created an entire missing 20 years of data that we are still trying to fill in today. That is not partisan, that is just what the Appropriations rider accomplished. Now let me connect the two pieces for you. The Tiahrt riders stopped the ATF from building data. The Dickey riders stopped the CDC from studying data. Together, they produced something remarkable. They produced a federal government that, by design, knew less about gun violence in America than almost any other comparable public health topic. That is what congressional riders can do when they get stacked on top of each other. If this video is helping you connect dots, imagine what the next one will do. I am working on a deep dive into the exact 5 words that protect you when an ATF inspection starts out. Your front door, subscribe so it shows up in your feed the moment it goes live. Now let me give you the third major piece. This one is happening right in front of us. For decades, there has been a permanent appropriations rider that the ATF itself cannot spend money to consolidate or centralize firearms records into a single searchable database. The Congressional Research Service lays out multiple statutory provisions blocking a national gun registry. That rider does not expire. It is renewed annually and treated as background law. Let me give you the live 2025 to 2026 version, because this is where the topic gets shoved firmly into the current year. In 2025, Representative Michael Cloud and Senator James Risch introduced something called the No REGISTRY Rights Act. The stated purpose of that bill is to dismantle any existing consolidated ATF database and to put into statute an absolute bar on creating one. Senator Risch said it plainly, the bill would ensure such a registry can never be implemented. Now look at this. In 2025, the ATF itself announced a formal rescission of its controversial pistol brace rule from 2023. ATF also publicly launched something it called a new era of reform focused on transparency and partnership with the industry. Critics on the right, however, point out that statement is a bit ironic because the agency's own reforms database has been criticized as functioning. In practice, like a registry, it is statutorily forbidden to maintain. That tension is exactly the story. The agency says it is not building a registry. Independent audits say the data is consolidated. Congress says no, the DOJ says trust us. That tug of war is not new. It has been the quiet background of American gun policy since the 1970s. But wait, there's something even more important. Hey, real quick, about 73% of the people watching this right now are not subscribed to this channel. That means almost 3 out of every. For people seeing this information for free are going to forget the names of these riders within a couple of weeks. Do not be part of that group. Join the 50,000 gun owners who already get these breakdowns the day they drop. Click subscribe now. It costs you nothing. Let me walk you through the most recent budget fight because it ties everything together. The FY2026 ATF appropriations process this year landed the agency at roughly $1.585 billion in spending authority. That number sounds huge until you remember what it actually buys: personnel salaries, trace data, infrastructure, field offices, the National Tracing Center. The headcount cap inside the bill is what really limits ATF's street-level effectiveness. Congress sets a ceiling on how many ATF agents can be paid out of that bucket. Now here's what most people get wrong. They hear $1.5 billion and assume ATF can do anything. They cannot. They hear we cut ATF and assume guns are unregulated now. They are not. Law enforcement and prosecution against violent gun crime continues. Background checks still run through NICs. Felons still cannot buy guns. Straw purchases are still illegal. What changes is style. What changes is which enforcement tools ATF chooses from. What changes is whether ATF pushes broad definitions on pistol braces, certain receivers, or certain accessories. When Congress tightens the rider, ATF tends to narrow its interpretation rather than fight Congress in open court. That is the hidden leverage. Congress does not have to outlaw a rule. It just has to defund the enforcement of the rule. And that is happening with a number of proposed rules right now this budget cycle. Now, quick legal note. This is educational information, not legal advice. Always consult an attorney for your specific situation. Statutory language, appropriations riders, and DOJ interpretations can shift between federal and state law and between fiscal years. Stay current on what your state actually does. Here's the practical takeaway. Most people miss when DOJ is knocked out of it. The knock did not come from a courtroom. It came from a budget rider passed by Congress. That is the mechanism almost nobody explains on cable news. Let me give you the 4 big lessons in plain English. First, every year, Congress must pass a bill giving DOJ and ATF money to operate. That bill is called an Appropriations bill. If the bill does not pass, the agencies shut down. If the bill passes with strings attached, the agencies live within those strings. Second, the Tiahrt Amendment and its sister riders mean the FBI must destroy approved background check records within 24 hours. Trace data cannot be released in bulk. Consolidated firearms records cannot be assembled into a single searchable database. Third, the Dickey Amendment since 1996 has kept the CDC from using federal funds to advocate or promote gun control, and that language was interpreted so strictly that almost 2 full decades of federal gun violence research was effectively frozen. Fourth, this year, the No REGISTRY Rights Act is moving. The pistol brace rule is being formally rescinded. The FY2026 ATF spend sits near $1.585 billion, and the underlying prohibition on registry building has been quietly enforced through annual riders for decades. Now here is what you as an individual gun owner should actually do with this. Stop assuming the ATF is a runaway agency. It is not. It is heavily constrained by its own funding bill. Stop assuming Congress is powerless to stop executive overreach. It is not the Appropriations. Power is the most concrete weapon Congress uses against the executive branch every single year. Stay aware of what your own representatives are doing on the Appropriations Committee. If you care about gun policy, your 2 most important elected officials are probably not the ones giving speeches about it. They are the ones writing the language in the Commerce, Justice, State spending bill each fall. Laws change fast, like really fast. Subscribe now so you are never caught off guard when a new rider drops. The next video walks through the exact 5-word script to use when an ATF agent shows up for an inspection. That one expires if you do not learn it ahead of time. So let me wrap this up the way I wish someone had wrapped it up for me years ago. Congress telling DOJ to knock it off is not a slogan. It is not a meme. It is a literal, repeatable, line-item-driven process that has shaped American firearms law. For more than 40 years, every time you hear that the ATF is being defunded or that Congress blocked the DOJ, that is what they actually mean. You have now heard the names. The Tiahrt Amendment, the Dickey Amendment, the Permanent Appropriations Rider Barring Registry Consolidation, the No REGISTRY Rights Act, the FY2026 ATF budget, the pistol brace rescission, you know the years, 1978-4. The Consolidated Records Ban, 1996 for the Dickey Rider, 2003 for the original Tiahrt attachment, 2025-2026 for the current cycle of rescissions and renewals. If this channel is helping you understand what is actually going on, the best way you can support it is to hit subscribe and turn the notification bell on. That is the simplest, cleanest way to make sure the next breakdown lands right when it goes live. Until then, stay informed, know your legislators, keep your eyes on the appropriations bills, and remember that the most important fights in gun law are not always the loudest ones. The quiet ones are usually where your rights are being decided right now.